You won't believe it, but this story really impressed me. I never imagined my world could shift so suddenly. You can spend years dreaming of something, only to realize, once it finally happens, that it's nothing like what you pictured. That reality hit me the instant I held my son for the first time, the child I've been waiting for. He was only minutes old, yet an unsettling feeling settled in my chest. I should have been overwhelmed with joy, kissed my wife on the forehead, and thanked the universe for making me a father. But instead, a quiet fear crept in. His face, his hair, the shape of his lips, none of it looked like mine. I tried to brush it off, telling myself that newborns often look indistinct, that maybe it was just the hospital lighting playing tricks on me. But deep down, something felt off. Samantha, exhausted and drenched in sweat, lay back against the pillow. The birth had been difficult, so I swallowed my unease and forced a smile. "He's here, Sam," I said. "Our prayers have been answered." She only nodded, her eyes filled with love, but there was something else there too, a hesitation. It was as if she was watching me closely, gauging my reaction. That should have been my first clue that something wasn't right. We'd been married for nearly 7 years. For the first 6, Samantha and I had struggled to conceive. We saw specialist after specialist, sitting under the scrutiny of fertility doctors, endocrinologists, anyone who might offer an answer. We ran every test imaginable: her hormone levels, her ovulation cycle, my fertility count. Every result came back normal. No issues. Nothing at all to explain why we weren't getting pregnant. Yet the months kept slipping away, each one ending in disappointment when Samantha's period arrived. The heartbreak was relentless. We were desperate. One afternoon, about 4 years into our marriage, Samantha approached me with an idea. She was wringing her hands, wearing that nervous expression she always got when she thought I might disagree. "Michael," she said softly, "maybe we should think about using a donor." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I knew exactly what she meant. A donor. Another man's DNA. Even though every test said I wasn't the problem, the idea that she might doubt me stung. But more than that, I wanted our child to be ours. I had dreams of passing down my grandmother's striking green eyes, my father's strong jawline. The thought of raising a child who carried another man's genes unsettled me. I reacted quickly, maybe too harshly, though I tried to keep my voice steady. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm sorry, Samantha. I can't do that. Let's keep trying, just the two of us. One day, God willing, it'll happen." She held my gaze, her dark eyes searching mine. "But it's been years, and the doctors say everything is fine," she whispered. "Why not?" I sighed, my gut twisting with guilt, but my answer didn't change. "No," I said again, this time firmer. "I just can't." She didn't argue. She just nodded, too easily. Looking back, I should have noticed that something was off, that she had already made up her mind. But at the time, I was just relieved the conversation was over. And so we kept trying, month after month, heartbreak after heartbreak. Then, just when we were on the verge of giving up, Samantha missed her period. She took a test. Positive. That moment was the happiest of my life. I dropped to my knees, tears in my eyes. 6 years of prayers had finally been answered. The pregnancy was smooth, nothing unusual, just the expected nausea and exhaustion. But something strange happened. Samantha started attending doctor's appointments alone. "You're working so hard, Michael," she reassured me. "It's just a routine ultrasound." I wanted to go, but I also hated missing work. So I let it slide. I had no reason to suspect anything. Then came the big day. After a long, exhausting labor, our son, Oliver, was born. His first cry echoed through the room. When the nurse placed him in my arms, I felt something I couldn't explain, an unease that sank deep into my bones. I told myself it was just new dad nerves, but the feeling didn't go away. At home, I threw myself into fatherhood. I fed him, changed his diapers, sang him lullabies. Meanwhile, Samantha rested, watching over Oliver with a look of pure adoration. But whenever her gaze met mine, there was something else there. Something like worry. I chalked it up to postpartum emotions. But deep down, something was gnawing at me. Oliver's hair was darker, thicker, with a wave mine didn't have. His ears had a shape that didn't match mine. Babies change, I told myself. I waited, searching for even the smallest resemblance. But it never came. Weeks turned into months. The more Oliver grew, the clearer it became. He didn't look like me. Not even a little. It wasn't just subtle differences. It was enough for strangers to notice. Acquaintances would smile and say, "Oh, he must take after your wife's side." Or, "Does your wife's family have different ancestry?" I forced a smile, nodded along, but inside my stomach churned. Meanwhile, Samantha became unusually protective of Oliver, even around me. She seemed to tense up whenever she caught me studying his face too long. And that's when the thought first crept in. Had she gone behind my back and used a donor? It was the only explanation that made any sense, but at first, I refused to believe it. Samantha wouldn't do something like that, would she? I tried to shake the thought, to convince myself I was being ridiculous. But as Oliver grew, the idea lodged itself deeper in my mind, refusing to let go. If it were true, though, why wouldn't she just tell me? She knew how much I wanted a child. Maybe she thought I'd never accept the truth. The more I dwelled on it, the harder it became to ignore. My anxiety started overshadowing the joys of fatherhood. Then, one evening, as I was tidying up the living room, I noticed Samantha staring at her phone, completely absorbed. Her face looked pale, almost haunted. She was looking at a picture, a man, older, with a strong jawline, a subtle smirk, and dark, wavy hair. Before I could make out the name on the screen, she quickly locked her phone and set it down. I acted like I hadn't noticed, but something about the way she reacted unsettled me. Was that the donor? A few nights later, just after 2 a.m., Oliver's cries jolted me awake. I picked him up from his crib, rocked him against my shoulder, and softly hummed a lullaby. In the dim glow of the nightlight, I studied his tiny face, his delicate nose, the arch of his brows. And then it hit me. I had seen those features before. Not on some anonymous donor, but on someone much closer. Henry, Samantha's first husband. The one who had passed away in a tragic accident years before she and I reconnected. She never talked much about it, just that it had been a painful chapter in her life. For a moment, I scolded myself. That's ridiculous, Michael. Henry's been gone for years. There's no way. But the more I stared at Oliver, the harder it was to dismiss the resemblance. I could picture the old photograph Samantha had shown me once. Henry's piercing stare, his dark curls, that unmistakable jawline. A slow, creeping dread settled over me. I gently laid Oliver back in his crib and left the room. My mind was racing. I paced the living room for hours, staring into the darkness, trying to convince myself I was just imagining things. But I couldn't let it go. The next day, I started searching. Every time Samantha left the house for errands, I dug through drawers, opened cabinets, and sifted through old boxes in the attic. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd find nothing and feel like an idiot. But I had to be sure. Then, deep in the basement, buried in a half-broken trunk covered in dust, I found it. A thick folder labeled Genome Preservation. My heart pounded as I flipped it open. The words jumped out at me like a slap to the face. Northwest Cryogenics and Fertility, Genetic Material Preservation. And then, the name that made my blood run cold. Henry Davis. The date on the documents was from months before his death. My hands trembled as I turned the pages. It was all there. Paperwork detailing storage conditions, legal disclaimers, and a chilling section about posthumous usage. The forms clearly stated, release only to spouse or authorized partner named below. Samantha's name was right there. There were multiple documents. Some were from just after Henry's death, but others were more recent. Much more recent. My stomach lurched as I read through the records. Samantha had been visiting the cryo facility for consultations while we were married. Some of the dates even lined up with the months we were still actively trying to conceive. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. If these papers were real, then Samantha hadn't just used a donor. She had used Henry, her dead husband. A wave of emotions hit me all at once. Rage, betrayal, shock, heartbreak. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the folder. Why? Why would she do something like this? Then, an even sicker realization crept in. She must have known I'd never agree. She knew I wanted a child so badly that she manipulated me into thinking this was ours. I could almost hear her voice, so calm, so reassuring. "Don't worry, Michael. Everything's fine." Meanwhile, she had been carrying out this scheme. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I clutched the documents as if they were evidence of crime. Because, in a way, they were. I shoved them into a plastic bag, marched upstairs, and locked them in my desk drawer. My first instinct was to confront her right then and there. But something told me to wait. I needed to gather more proof. Besides, Oliver's first birthday was only a few weeks away. I decided I'd hold off until then, gather every last fact, and when the time was right, I'd expose the truth in one devastating blow. From that moment on, everything changed. Every conversation, every interaction with Samantha felt tense. I could barely look at her the same way. She noticed a shift. "Michael, is something wrong?" she asked one evening, her voice laced with concern. I forced a weak smile and shook my head. "No, everything's fine." At night, while she slept, I sat at my laptop, digging deeper. I combed through her financial records, searching for anything suspicious. And then I found them. A series of payments made to Northwest Cryogenics. Samantha had been funding this plan long before she got pregnant. Over a year before she told me the good news, she had already booked a procedure at a fertility clinic that worked with the cryobank. The payment dates lined up perfectly with the exact time she claimed we had conceived. It was undeniable. I was devastated, furious, crushed. How could she do this? How could someone I trusted so deeply betray me, so completely? And worst of all, I let her keep me away from her doctor's appointments. Because I had trusted her. Maybe I was a fool, but I never imagined my own wife would secretly impregnate herself with a dead man's genetic material, her ex-husband's, and then pass the child off as mine. The betrayal was so complete, so surreal, that I could barely function. Sleep became impossible. My mind churned through 1,000 thoughts, each one darker than the last. I still loved Samantha, or at least I had. She was the woman I had spent 7 years building a future with, dreaming of family. But how could I even look at her now without feeling violated? And Oliver. God, Oliver. I adored that boy with every fiber of my being. But now, every memory, the first time he gripped my finger, his sleepy little sighs, his tiny, trusting smile, felt tainted. Because Oliver wasn't mine. His father was another man. A man who wasn't even alive. I wrestled with my emotions, guilt, rage, heartbreak, until the morning of Oliver's first birthday arrived under an ominous sky. The forecast predicted rain. Fitting. Samantha had planned a small gathering. Just her parents, a couple of close friends, nothing extravagant. The perfect setting for cake, laughter, and the complete obliteration of our marriage. I had my own plan. That afternoon, I was scheduled to meet with my lawyer to discuss the legal fallout. I had evidence, clear, undeniable proof that I wasn't Oliver's father. I could sue for paternity fraud, sever all ties, and ensure Samantha faced consequences for her deception. I woke up early, my stomach twisting in a knot of dread and bitter anticipation. As Samantha busied herself with last-minute party preparations, I quietly retrieved the documents I had hidden in a black briefcase. It was all there, the cryobank records, the financial statements, the timeline that exposed her deception in cold, clinical detail. Finally, the truth. At exactly 2:30 p.m., the guests arrived under a light drizzle. Samantha's parents, Victor and Catherine, walked in first, beaming with excitement. Catherine scooped Oliver in her arms, pressing kisses to his chubby cheeks. "Oh, it's my precious grandson's big day," she cooed. I sat in steely silence. By 3 o'clock, everyone had gathered in the living room. The cake, a simple white one with a single candle shaped like the number 1, sat on the table. Oliver clapped his tiny hands, delighting in the attention. Samantha glanced at me, a warm yet wary smile on her lips. Something in her eyes flickered, an unspoken question. Did she sense that something was off? A twinge of guilt twisted in my gut. Should I really do this? Was it fair to shatter everything at his birthday party? But I forced the doubt away. She had orchestrated this deception. She could handle the consequences. We sang happy birthday, snapped pictures, and laughed as Oliver smeared frosting all over his face. Then, Samantha turned to me. "Michael," she said, "do you want to say something?" She was expecting a heartfelt toast, a proud, fatherly speech. Instead, I cleared my throat, my pulse hammering. "Yes," I said. "I do." I looked at the small group, my gaze lingering on Samantha. "I'd like to share some news, something about Oliver's paternity." The room tensed. Samantha's smile vanished. Her mother's brows knitted together in confusion. A friend shifted uncomfortably, coughing into his fist. Samantha let out a nervous laugh. "Michael, what are you?" "I know, Samantha." My voice shook with anger. "I know about Henry's genetic material." The air seemed to be sucked from the room. Samantha froze. Her face drained of color. "I found the documents," I continued. "In the basement. The cryobank records, the procedures, the bills. I know Oliver isn't mine." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Then chaos. Catherine's face twisted in shock. What is this madness?" she sputtered, looking between us. Samantha's father, Victor, glared at me. "What do you mean, not yours?" Samantha's eyes welled with tears. "Michael, please," she whispered. "Can we talk about this in private?" Her voice was trembling. Desperate. She glanced around at the startled guests. "This is Oliver's birthday, why?" But she couldn't finish. Victor's voice thundered over hers. "You're spouting nonsense." His fists clenched at his sides. "That baby is my flesh and blood grandson. How dare you ruin this day with your accusations?" I refused to back down. "It's not nonsense," I shot back, pulling the folder from my briefcase. "Here's the cryobank contract. Henry Davis's name, clear as day. Here's the fertility procedure date, a year before Oliver was born. And these," I flipped through the pages, my voice unyielding, "are bank statements proving she paid for the procedure." I met Samantha's wide, horrified eyes. "I also have blood test comparisons showing I am not Oliver's biological father." The room collectively sucked in a breath. Samantha's face crumpled. She looked as if she might collapse. Oliver, blissfully unaware, babbled happily, smearing frosting onto Samantha's sleeve. Victor's voice shook. "Samantha," he turned to his daughter, "tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding." Samantha's lip trembled. She swallowed hard. Then, in a halting, broken voice, she said the words that sealed her fate. "It's complicated." She sniffled. I used Henry's genetic material." A gasp rippled through the room. "But Michael," she pleaded, "we wanted a baby for so long, and you refused any donor. I didn't think you'd ever accept it." Catherine's face contorted in horror. "You used your ex-husband's genetic material?" she shrieked. "When were you going to tell us?" Samantha's shoulders shook. I did it for us," she sobbed. "I wanted us to have a baby. And it's not like I cheated with a living person or anything. Henry was already gone." I let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "You think that makes it better?" Samantha dissolved into sobs. "Please, Michael, you have to believe me. I did this for us." I felt nothing but disgust. "No," I said. "You did this for yourself. And you lied to me every single day since." I took a step forward, my voice steady, final. "You let me think Oliver was mine. You had me sign the birth certificate. You trapped me into being a legal father to another man's child. That is paternity fraud. Samantha." Samantha let out a strangled sob. "We're done," I said. She collapsed to her knees, clutching Oliver tightly to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Michael, please," she choked out. "We can work through this." I turned away. She had stolen something from me that could never be repaired, and there was no coming back from that. "I swear, Michael," Samantha sobbed, her voice raw. "I wanted a child for us, not just for me." I backed away, trembling with rage. "Whatever you say doesn't matter anymore." Her face crumpled, but I didn't let it shake me. "I've already filed for divorce," I said coldly. "As soon as the hearing is scheduled, I'm suing you for paternity fraud. You tricked me into paying medical bills, into believing I was Oliver's father. You forged my name, my future, my entire life. We're finished." Samantha let out a sharp, wounded cry as I turned toward the door. Her mother moved to block my path, her voice a venomous whisper. What kind of man are you? She hissed. Oliver is your child, no matter where he came from. Samantha's father, Victor, stepped forward, his voice hard. You raised him for a year. That makes you his father. If your seed is broken, he spat, that doesn't mean you get to weasel out of fatherhood. You had no proof that you weren't the problem. Maybe your so-called normal tests were wrong. My vision blurred with fury. Don't you dare talk to me about being less of a man, I seethed. Your daughter lied. She planned this behind my back. She took her dead ex-husband's genetic material and trapped me. And you expect me to just roll over and accept it? That's exactly what a real man would do. Victor shouted. He wouldn't abandon his family. I clenched my fists, struggling to stay calm and control my temper. All of you, get the hell out of my sight. Victor stepped closer, his jaw tight. You're making a mistake, he growled. You walk out that door, and we'll sue you for child support. That's your son, whether you like it or not. Something inside me snapped. I took a step forward, my voice low and dangerous. You want to try me? Go ahead. Victor squared his shoulders, refusing to move. So I shoved him. Catherine shrieked. A friend darted between us, hands up, trying to de-escalate. The living room erupted into chaos. Oliver, frightened by the yelling, started wailing. Samantha was in full hysterics, tears pouring down her face. Michael, don't do this, she sobbed. Please. But I felt nothing. Just a cold, hollow fury. I strode to the front door and swung it open. Everyone out of my apartment. Now, this party's over. Samantha's parents kept shouting, but the other guests just stood there, stunned. You're not a real husband. Catherine spat. You're a coward. Victor's eyes burned with hatred. You'll regret this. We'll ruin you. But under the weight of everyone's stares, they finally grabbed their coats. Catherine shot me one last glare before storming out. Victor muttered curses under his breath. Samantha tried to approach me, her body trembling. Michael, she whispered. I took a step back, my voice a low warning. Don't you dare. She flinched. Then, with Oliver sobbing in her arms, she collapsed onto the couch. Every muscle in my body tensed as I pointed to the door. Out, I said, my voice shaking. Both of you. Now. Samantha swallowed hard, tears streaming down her cheeks. But, Michael, this is our home. Where will I even? I cut her off. This stopped being your home the moment you betrayed me. Don't make me call the cops. She let out a strangled sob. But for Oliver's sake, she forced herself to hold it together. She grabbed the diaper bag, her purse, and with one last, devastated look over her shoulder, she walked out into the rain, hugging Oliver tightly to her chest. Hours passed in a haze. I sank onto the floor, staring at the wreckage of Oliver's birthday party. The cake, half-eaten, was smeared across the coffee table. The single candle, a stupid, meaningless one, stood untouched. My chest felt hollow. I wanted to rage, to break something, to smash my fist through the walls. Instead, I just sat there, motionless. A part of me seethed. She had it coming. Another part ached. How did it come to this? I didn't move for hours. Then, around 1 a.m., my phone rang. I barely registered the sound before answering. It was a friend from the party. Michael, you should know. Samantha's in the hospital. Something inside me froze. What? I asked, my voice hoarse. Her parents say she collapsed. Fainted from shock. Some kind of breakdown. I clenched my jaw, my mind spinning with conflicting emotions. Anger, guilt, pity. Which hospital? I finally managed. He told me, then hesitated. Look, man, I get that you're furious, but maybe you should see her. This is serious. I ground my teeth. After a long pause, I muttered, I'll think about it. And then I hung up. I never went. I was too consumed by betrayal. Instead, I let the night swallow me whole. My lawyer had already assured me, you're in a strong legal position. If you prove deliberate deception, she can't come after you for child support. I had the evidence. Every document. Every lie. My phone flashed with more calls, probably from her parents. I ignored every single one. Each ring only fed my rage. The next morning, a thunderous pounding rattled my apartment door. I barely had time to blink before yanking it open. There they were, Victor and Catherine, disheveled, eyes hollow, like they hadn't slept all night. Catherine's face was streaked with tears. Victor's mouth was tight, his stare hard. He jabbed a finger into my chest. Samantha's in the hospital because of you. His voice was low, simmering with fury. You threw her out on the street with your child, while she was already under enough stress. Catherine cried. I exhaled sharply, my hands curling into fists. I looked Victor dead in the eye. She's there because of her own damn lies. I hissed. She did this. Not me. Catherine stepped forward, her voice trembling with fury. Michael, you've always been so damn self-righteous. Well, guess what? This is your family. I scoffed, shaking my head. Whether that child is biologically yours or not, you're still married to our daughter, she snapped. You have a responsibility. I let out a bitter laugh. My responsibility ended the moment she decided to break our vows. Catherine's face twisted with rage. You come here, preaching your moralizing nonsense, but what about Samantha's betrayal? She did it for you both. Catherine shrieked. She wanted a family. You refused a donor. I snapped. If my seed is defective, then explain why my test came back normal. I roared, my face burning with fury. Samantha refused to accept that sometimes fertility takes time. Instead, she took matters into her own hands, with a dead man's genetic material. I locked eyes with Catherine. That's monstrous, and you know it. Victor lunged forward like he was going to hit me. You better watch your damn mouth, he growled. I squared my shoulders, heart hammering. Get out of here, I said icily. Both of you. Victor stood firm, chest heaving. I'm done playing games, I continued. If you want to talk, get a lawyer and come at me in court. Otherwise, stay the hell away from my home. Catherine's voice shook with fury. You heartless jerk. That's your wife in the hospital. That's her child. I locked eyes with her. Not my child. Stop calling him that. I swallowed hard. I loved him. But now, I know the truth. Victor clenched his fists, his arm twitching. I saw it coming. I caught his wrist midair and snarled, Don't make this worse than it already is. I shoved it backward. He stumbled into Catherine, who nearly fell. Catherine let out a ragged sob. This is how you treat us? After everything? We welcomed you. You welcomed me as long as I was footing your daughter's bills and playing dad to a child that wasn't mine. I spat. Enough is enough. Catherine's hand shook as she pulled out her phone. We'll sue, she snapped. For defamation, cruelty, emotional damages. Do whatever the hell you want. I cut her off. Now get out. I slammed the door in their faces and locked it. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment, I thought they might kick the door down. But then, I heard their footsteps retreat. Then, silence. 3 days later, as I sat in my lawyer's office finalizing the divorce paperwork, I got word that Samantha had been discharged from the hospital. She was staying with her parents, figures. Mr. Peterson, my lawyer, flipped through my stack of evidence, nodding methodically. The cryobank forms, the procedure receipts, Oliver's birth certificate. Clear case, he muttered. We'll file for divorce on the grounds of fraudulent misrepresentation. The simplest approach is a petition to disclaim paternity. Paternity fraud, I murmured. Exactly, he nodded. You can request an immediate DNA test, though the cryobank records already speak volumes. I exhaled. I also have texts. Appointments. The proof. If Samantha contests, we'll subpoena the cryobank, Peterson said. They'll confirm she used Henry Davis's genetic material. He paused. And there's also an ethical issue here. Did Henry even consent to posthumous use of his genetic material? In some states, that's only legal if he signed off on it before his death. I clenched my jaw. This is going to be complicated, he admitted, but you'll likely win. She never told you any of this. She forged your paternity. Legally, you owe nothing. I should have felt relief. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, I did. But a sick, heavy feeling settled in my gut. It's not like I wanted to punish the baby. I loved him, but there was no way forward. Every fiber of trust, every drop of fatherly love I'd had, was ripped away the moment she lied. Peterson assured me that as soon as the papers were filed, Samantha would be served. I left his office in a daze, anger, sadness, and some bitter, aching longing for the life we should have had. A normal, happy family. Not 4 days later, a knock came at my door around dusk. I sighed. Her parents. Again. Annoyed, I yanked it open, ready for another round of screaming. But it wasn't them. It was Samantha. She looked awful. Pale, with dark circles under her eyes, like she hadn't slept in days. She was drowning in an oversized sweater, her shoulders hunched. And for a moment, for just a split second, the sight of her like that, wrecked by the storm of our shattered marriage, triggered old memories. Better times. Simpler times. I forced steel into my spine, blocking the door. What do you want? I asked coldly. Samantha's lip quivered, but her eyes were sharp. Michael, she whispered. Can we talk? Please. Just 5 minutes. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in her face. But after a long, grudging pause, I stepped aside. She slipped past me, her movements hesitant. I led her to the living room. She perched on the edge of the couch, hands twisting in her lap. You filed for divorce, she whispered. I got the papers. I crossed my arms. Yes. Her breath came out shaky, her eyes glassy with unshed tears. Michael, you have every right to hate me, but please, let me explain. I stayed silent. You refused the donor route, she continued, voice quivering. And I was terrified of never having a child. You have no idea what it felt like, month after month, seeing negative tests. I wanted that so badly. She swallowed hard. And then I remembered Henry had preserved his genetic material before the accident. Her voice broke. We'd, she exhaled shakily. We planned to start a family once, but we never got the chance. I felt my jaw tighten. I told myself it was still his donation, not from some random stranger. And maybe this could be the solution. I shook my head in disbelief. If it worked, I'd have a baby. We would have a baby. You'd be a father. Her voice was barely above a whisper now. I told myself you'd never have to know, that you'd love him unconditionally. I clenched my fists. So you decided to merge your past and present. Without me. Like I was nothing. Samantha flinched. I was scared you'd leave me, she admitted. I convinced myself that once Oliver was here, you'd love him so much that it wouldn't matter. She gave a broken laugh. I know it sounds insane. Maybe it is. But I was desperate. Desperate. My voice was ice. So that justifies lying to me? Forging my name on paternity documents? Making me legally responsible for another man's child? Samantha looked stricken. I glared. That's not how a partnership works, Samantha. You betrayed me at the deepest level. Tears streaked her face. She pressed a trembling hand to her heart. I never stopped loving you, Michael. Even now, I do love you. She inhaled sharply. Please, if we can't fix our marriage, can we at least try therapy? We can find a way to... Enough. My voice cracked, but I stepped back, blinking away my own burning tears. The child I bonded with doesn't exist. That was an illusion. Samantha flinched like I had struck her. Oliver isn't my son. He's Henry's. Or more accurately, a child of technology and your lies. She rose, tears glistening, and reached for me. I recoiled. Don't touch me. A sob tore from her throat. If you want me to sign the divorce, she choked. I understand. But please don't sue me. Her voice cracked with desperation. Don't drag this through the courts. I can't handle it. The hospital bills, everything. My parents can't keep paying. I'll lose everything. I stared at her in disbelief. You can't handle it. My voice was sharp with disbelief. What about me? My entire world was shattered. I was deceived for over a year. Humiliated. I let out a bitter laugh. You and me dreaming about fatherhood. Imagining the day I'd see my own features in Oliver's face. And then you let me find out the truth in the most disgusting way possible. She wept silently, face twisted in regret. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I was wrong. But please, we loved each other once. I did this for us. I shook my head. No, you did this for you. I exhaled sharply. You never even gave me the courtesy of a choice. My voice was raw with anger. Get out, Samantha. Her whole body tensed. I'm not negotiating. Expect to be in court soon. She froze. Heartbreak etched across her face. Then, slowly, she trudged toward the door. She hesitated, glancing back. I really did love you, Michael, she whispered. I wish you could see that. And then, she was gone. The door shut quietly behind her, leaving me alone with the emptiness. 2 weeks later, the divorce was well underway. Samantha had been formally served, and in a final stroke of closure, I had her removed from the property deed. The house had always been mine. The mortgage was in my name, purchased before we married. My lawyer wasted no time processing an eviction notice as a precaution, though she was already gone. The message was clear. Don't come back. She didn't. Her parents made a last-ditch effort, demanding spousal support, threatening to smear my name in the local media. I recorded their calls, blocked their numbers, let my lawyer handle the harassment. The house was quiet now. Hollow. No Oliver's laughter. No cries in the night. Just me and the silence. It's better this way, I told myself. The alternative was living a lie. Still, late at night, memories crept in. The moment I first held Oliver, believing I was holding my own son. That moment hurt the most. I let the sorrow simmer until exhaustion finally pulled me under. The court case was swift. With cryobank documents and proof of Samantha's deception, my name was removed from the birth certificate. Paternity fraud was recognized. I was free. Samantha attended every hearing, frail and clutching Oliver. Sometimes, I caught him staring at the bright courthouse lights, his little face full of wonder. He had no idea what was happening. But I reminded myself, he's not my child. The judge ruled in my favor, citing irreconcilable differences and fraud. Samantha wept as she left with Oliver. Catherine glared at me. Victor was nowhere to be seen. I felt nothing. No anger. No triumph. Just closure. The gavel fell. Without a word, I turned and walked away. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support means a lot and helps me create more content like this.